So you just had one of a series of town halls. Do you think Democrats should be having more town halls right now? I know you guys have been critical of the White House and how things have been going. Do you think the playbook from Democrats should be going back to your districts and talking to people?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's what's required of us in general. I've always made sure that we do town halls, and typically we do teletown halls, which we get thousands of constituents. We do them once a quarter without fail, so that I can kind of lay out what's going on. Usually I'm in DC when we're doing those teletown halls. But for me, this is more so a vibe check, right? I know that the news has been pretty daunting coming out of DC, especially as we've been dealing with this budget fight or reconciliation fight. And it's important for me to understand in the moment, how are my seniors feeling? Because these are the people that have elected me to be their representative. And so I want to know what their concerns are. I know that we still have some time before the Senate decides what's going to happen, and we may end up having to debate or fight over a Senate bill instead of the House bill. I want to make sure that in real time, I have real information. I can guess at what I feel like my constituents would feel in certain moments, but it is good to actually hear directly from them. And my seniors were absolutely on point, and I'm excited to know that they have not gotten lost in the sauce or fallen for the false narratives, but they actually have sought out the truth, and they understand how problematic this big ugly bill is.
You called it big ugly bill. The president
Yes.
calls it a big beautiful bill. It only passed the House with one vote. You mentioned your colleague on oversight and just Democrats in general have had some deaths, so that vote may have been different. The details could change in the Senate side, but you specifically spoke to seniors because some of the things that you and Democrats have been talking about are possible impacts to Medicaid and to SNAP. Let's talk about Medicaid. What does this bill as is do to Medicaid?
So here's the deal. They are trying to shift a lot of the burden on a lot of these programs to the states, right? And so the states have their own budgets. And granted, Texas, we tend to be in the overflow on our budgets. That doesn't necessarily happen in most states. But just imagine what happens when your car breaks down unexpectedly. You've got all your bills laid out, and then all of a sudden you get hit with this big bill to fix your car. And it's like, wait a minute, that wasn't in the plan, that wasn't in the budget. So something is going to fall by the wayside. And that's exactly what we absolutely anticipate is going to happen when it comes to Medicaid as well as SNAP benefits. They're like, oh no, we're just making the states do a little bit more and that kind of stuff, but it's not in their budget. It's not part of their plan. And the reality is that people are paying into a federal system. And so it's like, well, what are we using these federal dollars for if you aren't going to pay for some of the basics? You know, in this budget or this reconciliation bill, they want to take defense spending, which I spent a lot of time talking about. If we really wanted to look for some cuts that won't necessarily harm our constituents, we should start with defense. Well, they want to take defense spending up to $1 trillion. That doesn't make sense. Like, if SNAP and if Medicaid were having so many problems with their auditing process that they could not pass no matter what, guess what? I don't anticipate they'd be like, oh, throw more money into it. But that's what they do with defense. And it doesn't make sense, because the only people that benefit out of defense are a lot of people that do these big government contracts. And again, I made it clear that Elon Musk, the vast majority of the money that he gets from the federal government, it comes from the defense ledger. So imagine that. The thing that doesn't go down in the entire budget is defense. The other thing that I didn't talk about that won't go down is DHS. And so they decided to add literally hundreds of millions, I don't know if it was hundreds of millions. It was some millions though, for sure, of dollars into ICE specifically for them to get bonuses. And when we averaged out this amount of money that they were putting into ICE, we averaged it out based upon how many people actually work for ICE. Do you know that it would amount to approximately $42,000 worth of a bonus for every single person at ICE? And when we were having this debate and this markup in judiciary about that, I pointed out that the lowest paid person on the Hill, who had actually probably been sitting in that room, that committee room, all day long at that point, was only getting $45,000 for their entire salary. That is the lowest amount that we can pay somebody on the Hill. So you're telling me that the very people that are doing the hard work, working for us every single day, the least amount that we can pay somebody is $45,000, and you're going to give these people that are going out, busting people's windows, grabbing up U.S. citizens, grabbing up kids with cancer, all this kind of stuff, you're going to give them on average a bonus of $42,000? Now that's what waste looks like to me. That's not efficient use of government resources, especially when you're saying, you know what, that $6 a day to eat that people get in SNAP benefits, we just need to cut that while also giving $42,000 worth of a bonus to ICE. Or the fact that the president has spent, last I knew that we had tracked, was like $40 million just to go golfing, to go down to his own place at Mar-a-Lago. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, it's just about a lack of priorities on people in this reconciliation.
Where can both sides come together on some type of, you mentioned possibly reducing defense spending. That likely is not going to happen, honestly, right? So what can both sides come together on to try to make reductions in the budget?
Yeah, well, first of all, they are increasing defense spending. They don't have to increase it. It gets increased all the time. It just got increased within the last congressional session. So like, they don't have to increase it. There is no need to increase it, especially since we're already having a problem with recruiting people who want to go into the military in the first place. Like, we can have all the planes and trains and buses and boats. We can have all the things, but if ain't nobody gonna be on them to run them, what is the point, right? So that's number one. And if we were gonna make investments, we should be making investments in trying to get people to say, you know what, I actually want to serve. But when you've got a commander-in-chief that goes into West Point and starts talking about trophy wives and just is all over the place and talking about himself and his numerous investigations and reminding them that he is not qualified in the first place to be our commander-in-chief, instead of encouraging them, instead of telling them, you know what, you are the elite and we are so proud of you and we are so thankful for you, and we know that patriotism is at the top of everything that you do because this is what you decided you wanted to do with your life. Instead of actually pouring into them, he decided, you know what, I'm going to lie to them about why it is that I can't stay and shake their hands and thank them for being willing to serve, because he really wanted to go down and again go waste more tax dollars down at Mar-a-Lago. So I think that we could, number one, not increase spending in defense, and we honestly should have something in law that says if defense continues to fail their audits, there will not be an increase. And in fact, we probably should say for every failed audit, we are going to decrease a certain percentage, a minimal percentage, because we still have to remain safe, but a minimal percentage, we're going to decrease it so that they have some kind of incentive to actually get through an actual audit. They have no incentive at this point. So that's number one. Number two, what we could do is decide that we are not going to try to take these tax cuts that Trump initiated when he was in office the first time and further those tax cuts and deepen those tax cuts. We could say, you know what, we're just gonna roll it back. And when people talk about, oh, the last time we had a balanced budget, that was under a Democrat, it was under Clinton. And you know what? These were not the tax rates that people had to pay. Those people at the top had to pay more money into the system. And guess what? We were able to balance the budget without cutting people out of life-saving resources. So I think that that's another place that we could possibly get somewhere. I can tell you that in listening to some of these senators, they are concerned, you know, whether you're talking about Rand Paul, whether you're talking about Ron Johnson, and I think you could probably maybe venture over to Iowa and maybe a few other places, maybe up to Alaska. I think that there are going to be a number of senators that ultimately will come out, especially in these very rural states. You have to understand that when you start to say things like we're going to cut Medicaid, the reason that when we look at rural Texas, why they have historically had rural hospitals that have been getting shuttered, it is because we failed to expand on the state level when it came down to Medicaid. And so therefore that's a lack of resources that are available for these rural hospitals. Well, guess what? In these states that did expand, in these very rural states, you're talking about people whose life expectancy, say in the rural parts of their states, may go down tremendously because there may not even be a hospital there because they just won't have the funds to stay afloat. And I think that those senators who aren't just working within one little district that may not even have a hospital in that district, they are concerned because they understand the bigger picture when they look at the entire state. And when what I have said over and over so many times, it is rural America that uses more SNAP benefits than it is urban America. And I know that these senators, especially from these very large rural states, understand that. So under no circumstances do I think we're going to see $300 billion cut from SNAP, which is what we saw in the reconciliation package that came out of the House.
And my last question, what is the Democrat playbook for the midterms? Is it blaming Trump or is it talking about kitchen table issues?
You act like I got the playbook. You know,
What do you think
listen,
the playbook is?
I mean, the winning playbook, I think overall is just communication and education. I think that you can talk about kitchen table issues all you want to, but it comes down to actually having a rapport and making sure that people actually understand what it is that you're talking about. I don't think that we failed to talk about kitchen table issues, but basically Trump was simple and lied, right? Like he said, hey, the price of eggs are high, I'm gonna reduce it on day one. It was a very simple message. It was a lie.
Now. We're going down now.
I mean, after they went up through the roof,
Yep.
I mean, like, let's be clear. And honestly, they may be down for the second, but again, having people be educated about what it is that the FDA does and talking about things such as the bird flu and talking about if you have less birds because they are sick, then that's less eggs, but the demand is still the same, then the price goes up. Like, we have to make sure we do education. One of the other issues that I think that we had is that people didn't understand that the global pandemic was the cause of our inflation. They were like, oh, everything's high, and they just said, well, that's the person that's in office, instead of actually having this global conversation. Or one of the things that he was honest about is that he actually was going to institute tariffs. The problem was people didn't understand exactly what a tariff was, because he was able to say, you know what, and it's going to be those foreign countries that pay for the tariffs. So everybody's like, all right, cool. Like, but that's not the case. And so I think that our win is in the education. I think it is why I place an emphasis on making sure that we can do things such as our teletown halls, why I place an emphasis on coming in and having an actual dialogue with my seniors, because I do want to make sure that they understand what's going on, and I want to break it down into the simplest terms that I can, because some of this can be really, really complicated. But I think our win is in our education and our constant communication.